I'm Tommy,
And I'm Dante.
and you're listening to Twigging onto Twig, a regular podcast where we talk about Wildbow's most unbaggedly feline work, Twig.
In today's episode, we start a new arc, Arc 2, Cat Out of the Bag, hence unbaggedly feline. That's kind of an awkward expression I gave you to read out.
A little bit, it was stumbled over it a little.
But yeah, new arc, and we're talking about Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. And I don't think we have any announcements or housekeeping or anything to
Don't
get to.
believe so.
So, shall we jump right in?
Dive right into it.
We do have, I think we already had the impression that this was going to be a fairly episodic story.
At least initially, yeah.
And certainly now we've got a new arc, we've got a new plot and a new villain.
Or villains, since we know there's collaborators. And
so it's almost like a new story.
well, it's little dime novels, right?
Yes. The second book in the series.
Exactly, and now we have our full team set up with the addition of Mary as our newest, and I'm not sure what role she fits in the thing, but a newest lamb.
Yes. So for the chapter summaries, previously on Twig, as we said, Mary's joined the lambs. Mary is now a little lamb, whose fleece was white as snow.
In 2.1, the Lambsbridge orphans, all of them, go for a walk. There's a lot of chit-chat, and Cy and Jamie have a heart-to-heart. Hale shows up with Mary, announces that there's a new mission. Something got loose in the academy. Hale describes a plan of action, and they set off towards the academy. We also get, we'll talk about this more during the monster section, but we see and learn about more of the academy's different hunter projects, which I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm. In 2.2, the lambs go to the academy with Hale. There's a lot more chit-chat. This is a conversation-heavy couple of chapters.
Mm-hmm.
Once they get there, they learn more about the monster that got loose and the students who released it, and they go confront one of the culprits. Helen gets awfully intimate with the frat boy in a good cop, bad cop type of interrogation, and they learn that the kid's dad, an important politician, might also be involved in this plot.
Dun dun dun.
We should get an actual soundbite for that, since we do it at the end of every chapter.
I think we do. I am not nearly as original as I think I am.
I don't know. These are just Wildbow's good at cliffhangers.
Especially this Twig so far has felt very cliffhangery, and maybe there's something to that. And I think we might have talked about this in the past, but related to the just sort of the dime novel-ish aesthetic or tone. Those were, as far as I know, very much set up with that kind of, we want to get the audience back reading for the next page. So something that sort of fits that setting is going to pay homage to that.
Okay.
So, I guess warm and worm, not warm. I don't know why I said it that weirdly.
Worm and word.
Yes. Worm and Pact, the two works before this one, are also cliffhanger heavy.
Yeah.
So that might just be early Wildbow style. Yeah. The early Wildbow period. All right. So you want to talk a bit about the plot of these chapters?
Yeah. So like I said, they're very conversation heavy. There's a lot of Cy kind of showing off his abilities, or Cy complaining to Jamie, or just people talking together about sort of the mechanics of the lambs and interpersonal stuff. And we can talk about all that stuff later in the character section.
Yeah. I thought, just on that note, I did, we'll talk again about this more. I did think it was very interesting how it felt like Cy was getting ribbed, or, receiving as much as he was dishing out in terms of prying and prodding at people. That Cy's thing to be prodding, but it felt like he was getting it done to him as much as he was doing it to the other people in this chapters. And that starts off, I thought, pretty much initially with, what's his name? Rick.
Do you mean just the sort of banter that they have, or do you mean more like the plotting and scheming type stuff?
Both. I was thinking more like the needling. Like he
Okay,
gets needled as much, or if not more, as
I
he
think that's
needles
true.
others.
I think it's definitely true that like he tries to do the banter, but he tends to be the butt end of it more often
Yeah,
than not.
yeah.
But I think you're also right about like people using his own tricks on him, especially
Hmm.
in the second chapter where Gordon is like kind of mocking him about his like he has the whole like you're wrong on four counts
Right.
to Mary and is kind of going over them and Gordon is just like, oh, and now he pauses for effect, and then he's
Yep.
going to reveal there
Undercuts
was a
him.
yes. And it's
Yeah.
like, you know, Cy prides himself on knowing how everyone ticks, but they know how he ticks
Well,
too.
yeah,
And
exactly. I mean, that's explicitly called out with Helen, right? Like the
yeah, because he thinks she's
performing
doing the thing
his
for him to
sake. Yeah,
yes.
to get him thinking and going. Yeah,
Anyway, we'll talk about all that stuff later,
we
but
will. Yeah.
yeah. In terms of the actual plot,
Hmm.
and again, like in
Would
arc
you
one, the
say
plot is actually a plot.
that was going to be my question there? When you say plot, do you mean a plot or a plot?
Yes. Um, so this new plot, something has been released. It's gotten loose, and some people released it deliberately. And I think it's interesting uh, how the lambs are brought in because it's like Hale makes it very clear, like this isn't really
Your
a
strength.
scenario where you would really excel in. We're
Yeah,
just putting you in there so that like we don't get flack for not participating.
yeah. And also, just to sort of, we need to have extra eyes, and you're good at eyes. Sorry, Environment Canada is beeping at me. I don't know if that was audible. Um,
Uh, well, it
yeah.
was your reaction to it was audible.
Yeah, well, it was pretty loud, so I've kind of assumed that it got through, but maybe
Yeah,
not. Anyway,
no, we're having pretty bad thunderstorms around here.
yeah, but yeah, like Hale, I think says, oh, you're going to just be eyes. We need extra eyes because this thing hides, and the more bodies we have, it kind of brings to mind that classic, disappeared kid. We're just going to walk in a line, calling the name and covering every inch of ground on a sort of metaphorical level.
Sure, and I also think Hale putting them on like focus on the students, focus on the students, focus on the students. Huh? I think he wants us to focus on the students.
Yeah,
um, I think that's actually a good call on his part because even
definitely.
they're not good at monster hunting, but they are good at people
People
hunting.
hunting? Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
even if Hale was like, I didn't think we would be good here, I think that they would be good here and they're in
Definitely.
the
I mean,
right spot.
absolutely. I mean, I can't picture, Dog and Catcher or Gorger or the Hangman or whatever interrogating people well.
I mean, Dog would probably be very bad at interrogating people considering he doesn't have a mouth.
True. True. But, Dog and Catcher, they come together.
Yes.
Yeah. Um,
And so, in terms of the actual plot, once they get there, once they get situated, we learn a lot about the monster itself, which we'll talk about in the monster section, um, and what they're able to figure out about the actual conspiracy is that there were, I think they said three students, certainly like a few students who were collaborating. One of them is this character, Walter, who was one of the students who was building the monster.
hmm
So we have Walter. The other students who were building the monster are probably not involved,
and
but
probably dead.
uh, maybe. I don't think they said that, but it
No, but
wouldn't
I kind
surprise
of
me.
got the implication that if anything gets loose down there, there's a high casualty count.
Yes. But actually, I do remember now that Hale said that the other students on the project were available to be questioned.
You are right. You are correct. So they
So
are
they are
not
not
dead.
dead.
Good for them.
um, but Walter has other collaborators who I guess were on other projects or something.
Yeah.
And after some heavy interrogation involving Helen grabbing Walter by the balls and twisting them around behind him.
There was yeah, what she does, she, like, grabs them and then slides between his legs to pull him to yank him backwards or something.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a very
I wonder if that's like her usual technique when interrogating people.
I mean,
Who can
it
tell with Helen?
sounds effective.
Yes. Um,
We got a lot about Helen in these 2 chapters,
yes, we
which I
did.
thought was really interesting.
Um, yeah.
Especially, yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit, but just especially coming off the heels of, like, about last at the end of arc 1, how he interacts with Helen. But yeah, sorry, you were saying?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, they get him to talk a little bit, and actually, they don't even get him to talk, really. They just get him to react, and they deduce that, um, well, first of all, they deduce that his dad,
Yeah,
who is a prominent politician, is um, is sort of bankrolling him through the academy,
yeah,
and
which
secondly, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just that tells us some interesting things. Either that the academy itself is not as well regarded as we've sort of been led to imply. If someone who has a lot to lose if they're on the wrong end of stuff is actively bankrolling them, or bankrolling someone who's working against them or actively acting against them, or that this person in theory has a rival academy supporting him, or that he's on the side of a rival academy. It's not something that one just does on their own, I believe. I don't know if I'm being clear with what I'm trying to say there.
Like, I think that bankrolling your kid through university is common enough that I wouldn't second
No,
guess it.
oh, no, I meant the, bankrolling the sabotage, or, like, supporting the sabotage,
Oh,
or setting
yeah,
up the
yeah.
sabotage, you don't like, yes, I agree, rich people sending their kids to university and paying for it is absolutely standard and nothing to, like, really talk about, but if he's setting him up to be a saboteur or whatever, that tells us something.
hmm Yeah. So we kind of have those 2 points about Walter's dad. Firstly, that he's paying for Walter's education and lifestyle. And secondly, that he's apparently also involved in
Mhm.
this release of this monster. Um, that says his dad was involved, a powerful politician in another prominent city, no less, which raised ever so many questions.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that it's interesting that you brought up that maybe he's acting on behalf of another academy because um, other academies visiting the bowels of the university is something that gets brought up in this chapter,
Mhm.
just like super briefly, but
But just casually, yeah, I think that's part of why, just the fact that there is in the text this talk about other academies in relation to this is part of why, it's drawing attention to it for a reason,
mm,
in theory.
yeah,
Maybe that reason is to distract us, but it's there.
yeah,
We're
or just to like add more texture
potentially.
to the universe. You never
Yeah.
can tell with these details. Sometimes they grow into plot points, and sometimes they're just decoration.
Mhm.
But I think that's how Wildbow constructs his stories. Is he just kind of seeds these details, and then he can pick them up later and turn them into plot points or
Yeah.
not as the story develops. So speaking of world details,
Yep.
unless you had anything more to say about the plot,
Nope. Definitely do not, because we're just still in the initial stages of the plot, so
yeah,
I'm sure we'll have more to talk about the
as we learn
plot
more,
as we learn the details, yes.
yes,
But yeah, just generally world building. It's called out again how all these stitched horses and stitches are like protected by tarps and stuff, and it just seems so dumb as in you know uh, as part of the world that your infrastructure is so dependent on something that's so damaged by something that you have set up, constant rain. Like there must be something that we're unaware of to make the constant rain worth it for the hazard it poses to the stitched that are, so seemingly integral to every aspect of life in this city.
yeah. I kind of feel like, everything is plants and trees and vines and whatever. So probably
Yeah,
the rain is very beneficial to their society.
absolutely.
And, the fact that they could just throw a tarp over their stitched
But
solves this entire problem. So
it
maybe it isn't as
doesn't
dumb as it
though, because tarps are leaky, and it just doesn't feel.
Yeah,
It
but maybe
feels
these are like specially grown tarps.
okay that like
Um,
actively spit all the water far away.
yes.
Yeah, no, I don't know. It
I don't
doesn't
know.
seem like an efficient use of
Sure,
resources.
sure. I did think it was interesting though that they mentioned like while they were in the rain, and so I was like, I like getting wet. I like being in the rain.
Yeah,
And then he mentions that like 2/3 of the Lansbridge orphans were like actively enjoying the rain. And I was like, I suppose if you're living in a society where it rains constantly,
you have to.
you might find that they enjoy the rain more than people who
Yeah,
don't get all that much rain.
I don't know. Those of you who live in stereotypically rainy places, feel free to chime in here. And tell us what you think of rain,
Hmm.
Pacific Northwest or the UK or whatever. That's like stereotypically soaked.
Yep.
Um,
Or
and
maybe it's like us with snow. Like the kids all love the snow,
I
and
love
the
snow.
adults are all like, "Oh man, I have to shovel again." Rah, rah,
I love snow.
rah.
And part of that definitely comes from the fact that I lived almost a decade in Florida and had not a single season
Mm,
when I was down there. But I,
yep,
I missed having seasons. I missed snow. I missed all of that.
sure.
But I see your point, and I can see getting tired of it. It's just such a beautiful thing, snow.
Yep.
Um, and I was also curious as to whether, the ubiquity of all these biopunk projects stitched everywhere and, you know, l- rabbit fetus monsters as beasts of burden in the street and even buildings held up by the vines and all that, whether this is a result of Radham being like a university town, the academy's right there to produce stuff, or whether, this is, I already used the word ubiquitous, but I'm going to use it again, whether it's ubiquitous throughout the setting, like even a
Hmm.
small town somewhere that doesn't have an academy, whether they're going to be as drowned in stitched and
Yeah,
abominations of all types.
it's a good question. Or maybe every city has an academy,
Yeah, maybe, but and then the Radom is slightly more prestigious one because it feels like they talk about the academy with a certain level of like,
like prestige.
yeah, and if every town has an academy, then it doesn't mean as much.
Yeah,
Though I guess this is the academy with people like Ibit and or Ibat. What was his name?
I don't
Helen's.
know. The audiobook pronounces it Ibit, but
Okay, I'll take it as Ibit then. Um, yeah, just as many people, maybe this is, every town has a community college. Not every town has a Harvard
sure.
type of
Yeah,
deal. I don't know.
yeah. No, it's definitely a good question, and I don't think it's one that we can
It,
answer
no,
either way without seeing more. Because really, it could go either way.
absolutely, absolutely.
Speaking of the Academy, we get to see some new and interesting features of the Academy itself. Um, we
Hmm.
see the fancy entrance with the steel doors
Which
that
is
are
also not the entrance that they use. They use
right.
the tiny entrance next to it.
Yes, which I'm
Um,
sure is also like
yeah.
strengthened and reinforced.
Oh, I'm sure. But yeah, it kind of made me think of like those old houses that have like a servant's entrance or whatever, so that like
Yep,
you don't see the servants going through and you know serving, doing the things that they need to do.
yep.
Um, I mentioned this in my live read years ago or a year ago, whenever I was doing that. But it made me think. I had friends who were in Baltimore, and they were renting an apartment in what used to be once upon a time a rich person's house and was now owned by a lawyer's firm. And
Okay.
what they were living in was up the top level, essentially the a two-level attic apartment, but was once the servants' quarters of the house.
Hmm.
So the whole body of the house was this lawyer's office, this lawyer firm, legal firm, and they were renting out the servants' quarters, and they had their own private staircase because the servants, had to be able to get in and out without the house seeing people in the house seeing them.
Right.
Um, and I guess for the legal firm, it was just really nice to have someone living there full time because they had all kinds of important documents and stuff, and having someone on the premises
Sure.
helped. But yeah, it was a really,
That's really interesting.
yeah, like it was an interesting place to live in.
Yeah, I can imagine. It'd be kind of weird, but also
Yeah,
really cool.
yeah. It did get very hot there, especially, Baltimore summer, but
Sure.
yeah. Um,
I did think it was interesting with these like reinforced doors and Sai says pity about the town. But
yep.
the academy was built to stand tall through virtually any scenario.
I thought that
Which
was. Oh,
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I thought it was funny and how that contrasts with the fact that the threats are all coming from the academy and from
Oh yeah.
inside.
Yep. Absolutely. I
Pity
also
about
thought,
the academy, but the
but the
town is
town
well
would be
protected.
fine. Though, what I was going to bring up is the fact that this Whiskers had 6 dead inside the academy and 1 on top of the walls, which
Which means the
means the
walls
walls
aren't
are,
very helpful.
yeah. And they're like, oh, this it's probably out of the academy already, out in the town. It's like, well, then what was the purpose of the walls?
Well,
I guess maybe it
I
would
don't know.
keep someone like some project like Psy inside.
No, because you know that Sai is all about climbing walls.
That is, you're 100% side be out in a second.
So really, the walls wouldn't protect the town from the academy because everything that the academy makes is
Yeah,
well able to get over
I
tall
mean,
walls.
if the purpose of the academy is, as we've kind of been implied, to create weapons of war, then in theory, you'd want your weapons of war to be able to get past walls.
Yes.
So yeah, pity about the town and the academy, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
Though that might be talking also a little bit about um the hostility that people as we know, is like a thing that they're talking about in that the regular people have towards the academy, so the academy can shut itself off if there are riots or
Right.
like the I don't want to say the secular forces because the academy is not a religious institution, but the
Sure.
you know what I mean,
Yep.
the yeah, someone from outside the academy attacking the place,
Mhm.
the walls would protect them.
Yeah. I suppose also, like, if they're building weapons of war, then that would imply that there's a war that they're building weapons for.
That is true. Yeah.
And, like, we don't know how far Radom is from the
The
front.
front.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
we live in North America. We don't tend to have war fronts here
Not
in
recently,
global
at least.
conflicts. Um, so that might be something that kind of gets taken for granted. But
Yeah.
it's very possible that, Radom is like right on the border with like some
Whoever
enemy territory. And
whoever wasn't red on the globe.
yes, so
Absolutely. I mean, we did talk about Radom being in India, and we've heard about the Indian Empire being hostile. So
mhm.
exactly. Um, and then the other place that we learn about here are the bowels of the town or of the academy, or the reset or the labs, comma recessed.
I thought that was a funny detail.
I enjoyed that too. Um, but
Also
yeah,
known as what? The dungeons, the tunnels, or the pit?
yep. But the bowels to me is I think works best because that's like that body metaphor of the academy that just everybody in the know kind of, anybody with any kind of little bit of context of the academy are going to be like, okay, yeah, it makes sense for that to be the bowels, or
Yep.
the bowels makes sense for something to be the bowels.
Yep.
Um, and I kind of thought it was interesting that it is called the bowels. Like you get it because it's a tunnel underground, or whatever. It's hidden away, but the bowels also take in nutrient and produce shit. So uh these experiments that are coming out of there, I guess, kind of fall into that kind of category in a way of like they're just taking in all these things from the academy itself and then producing something that's not necessarily useful. It's like Whiskers doesn't seem very useful as a weapon, in my opinion.
Or you could like, you're saying that they take in the stuff and what comes out is just shit.
Hmm.
But like you could turn it around and say like the bowels take in stuff and produce like nutrients for the rest of the body.
That is that sure. Yeah, I suppose.
And so like now we're saying that the things that come out of the bowels and into the rest of the academy are like the life are
The lifeblood.
the nutrients that
That's
provide
possible.
the academy with what it needs to grow and thrive.
Sure, sure.
Yes.
Um,
Well, I say that knowing that I'm pretty sure that this Whiskers monster is not going to be helping the Academy to thrive now that it's out in the Academy.
Definitely not. Um, though, yeah, like they keep emphasizing the fact that this is underground, so they can just steal it off and drown it, or light it on fire, or write off anybody who's trapped down there with whatever's loose,
Mhm.
and start over in a week, or when whatever's down there has starved itself to death.
Yep.
Yeah,
Which will be great until somebody develops a fireproof.
fungus monster.
Yes.
Um,
A new kind of slime mold.
Yep. Though I also, the way Sai described it made me think of The Hobbit a little bit.
Okay.
Because here happened to be a hole in the ground. It was a nice hole in the ground with a roof over it and a short wall to keep the rain out. Lights punctuated a spiral stairways. An easy to miss plaque on a nearby wall indicated to those who were looking at that this was the entrance to the bowels. And then just that first bit about a nice hole in the ground with a roof over it is the introduction to the Hobbit. Was not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. And it kind of has the same
It
energy,
does, yes. Although in this case, it is a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled
full
with the
of
ends of worms and an
worms.
oozy smell.
Yes, absolutely. Just the way it was written has that same
Yes.
kind of like this is
No, I like that a lot.
comfy place.
It's a nice hole. It's just full of crap.
Yep, exactly. Um, well, yeah, and then and just the fact that about once every 2 weeks they have to lock it down because something's escaped or something's gone missing.
That's that's a lot.
That's so often. Like every 2 weeks, you have to basically write off everything down there.
Well, they do say that it's just like a section.
Sure,
So
but
maybe it's like there's like 12 sections and
yeah. And then they just drop Gorger down there, and
yeah.
I assume Gorger eats whatever's down there.
You'd feel like they would like put more effort into health and safety considering how often this is happening. You know, like, oh, something's breaking every 2 weeks. Like maybe we need to um, make better containers for them and better
Hmm.
locks or whatever.
Yeah.
Although they did say in a couple of chapters ago, like, flesh is cheap and dead flesh is
Yep.
cheaper. So like, eh,
Hmm.
somebody's died. Eh,
That's
whole
fine.
bunch of people died.
We have more
Whatever.
students to fill that hole.
Yep.
Yep. And I guess Gorger is fatter now.
Yep.
I have to say though, you bringing up health and safety is very Canadian of you.
Is it?
Oh well, working. I worked in the U.S. and I've worked in Canada. In Canada, every place has its health and safety plan and its health and safety officers. And in the
Yeah.
U.S., never,
What?
never even heard of health and safety as a workplace concept in a
What?
place that's outside of like a factory or whatever.
Are people like constantly getting injured in the States and they don't care, like at the
I
academy?
mean, presumably there's a certain level of like care. It's just Canada very much has laws and regulations about having a specific person in charge of dealing with health and safety and having health and safety programs.
Huh.
Whereas the places I've worked in the US, even some fairly large places, it was not part of like any kind of onboarding or training to talk about health and safety.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
What a strange place they are down south.
Well, glad I moved back.
You know what I learned recently? They don't have Interac in the States.
No, you have to use things like Zelle or Venmo or whatnot. Interac is just such a convenient tool.
Yeah.
It
It's like,
was, yeah, it was wild when I left and went down there, and it's like, okay, I have to use all these third party apps, and some of them don't work with each other. And in Canada, it's just you have to send money. That's fine. Just go. Just do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if people listening to us from the States are like, what the heck is this Interac?
Interac is I don't know who runs it, but it is tool that all the banks that connect all the banks, and you can just send money easily. It's also the what all the debit cards are powered by, I think.
Yeah. So like, can you use your debit card like a credit card in the States, or do you just like have it?
Yes, but only if the debit cards are generally backed by one of the credit card companies, usually Visa, I believe.
Mm. So
So
they don't
in
have like a bank issued debit card. They have like a Visa debit card.
no, it's issued by the bank, but it's like backed by Visa. It has like a little Visa logo on it, even if it's like a
Interesting.
TD card.
Okay. Interesting. What a
I
weird
mean,
place. I think we got a bit off topic
oh
there.
no, 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 no. Is there anything else you want to talk about the bowels or any other part of the academy?
uh, no, I don't think so. Because pretty much aside from that bit at the entrance, I thought it was one thing is that I thought it was interesting that the entrance to the bowels was so like small and unobtrusive.
Oh yeah.
Because
Well, I
like the
guess.
whole academy is all like super grand and ostentatious,
Hmm. I guess it
and
makes sense though, because then you have one small hole makes it easy to defend. Terrible to evacuate when you have something loose, but easy to
yeah,
block off, which I guess tells us about the priorities.
which means that they do care a little bit about health and safety.
A little bit. Well, not for the people trapped down there.
No, but enough to stop them from coming up where the important professors are.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Well, I mean, we get what the people, Hale striding through there and everybody getting out of his way. It's like they're not used to seeing
Yep,
important professors down there.
yep. Although it did say that Ibit spent a lot of time down there for
True.
while Helen was young,
That is
but
true.
Ibit is also kind of like not really the
He,
norm. I get the
he's
impression.
I get the um tiny pale spoilers here, but like I feel like he has kind of a similar vibe to I'm blanking on his name. Charles uh Unforsworn Alchemist guy.
Miller?
Yeah, Miller. Like that same kind of vibe of like I just do the science, I don't care about the politics or anything around it.
Maybe, but I do feel like he does care about the politics too.
Who, Miller or
A
Ibit?
bit.
I
Or he wouldn't be
mm,
such a prominent person in this highly political academy.
well, I feel like he's that prominent just because he's that good.
I mean, that's also possible.
Yeah, like they talk about him like he just does big things, big projects, big things, and like he
Mhm.
was goaded into making Helen.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
I don't know.
true.
I don't know.
Also, this is an academy where they really do care about the big, ostentatious science, and Niven is good
Absolutely.
at that. So
Yeah,
it just
yeah,
happens that his politics line up with theirs,
yeah.
and the fact
That's
that
fair.
he's a good scientist is a bonus.
Well, as Jacob brought up last episode, I don't know about being good scientist, good engineer, good
Yes.
uh, it's true. They don't do science. They like build things.
Yes.
Um, yeah. All right. Do you want to move on to the monster corner?
The monster corner.
Since we got a fair few monsters here this time.
Yes. A lot of monsters.
Yeah. Um, so before we get into that, I kind of wanted to just sort of bring up, Mary. Sai says to Mary, "I remember overhearing you talk about how you hadn't expected to deal with us." I said you thought it would be dog and catcher or one of the other experiments, and that kind of makes me wonder how secret the lambs are. Like whether it's one of those like nobody knows about them, or it's one of those. Are there rumors around town about, hey, if you do something that the academy might not like, either you'll get dog and catcher or the gorger, or some creepy kids in a uniform want to show up, and you disappear.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, we have pointed out in the past that like these are what was it, Dog and Catcher were the most well known of the
Yeah,
university's secret projects. So like the fact that the
yeah,
lambs are secret doesn't really
mean that
mean
they're
much.
secret. Yeah,
But it's certainly they're certainly not like well known.
like I'm sure. Yeah, I wonder. I do wonder if they're like people have talking hushed whispers, like, oh no, that's not real. Those like sure we've all
Hmm.
seen dog and catcher, but like yeah, there's no way the academy would send a bunch of creepy kids out after full grown adults, right?
Hmm. Yeah. I get the impression that like most people, unless you're like a serious enemy of the
Hmm.
academy and maybe have encountered them before, Like there might be certain circles that know about
Mhm.
them, but I do get the impression that they,
Yeah.
like in all of the places they've come across before, they've been um, able to go incognito pretty easily.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a difference also between, like, oh, you hear about these creepy kids, you picture something like ghost kids or whatever, like pale, whereas the
Sure,
lambs,
between
the reality
recognizing
of the
that these ones are
yeah,
those. Yeah,
yeah. Like, the lambs are normal kids, mostly.
yeah, certainly seem like it.
Yeah,
And nice kids at that. And some of them
exactly.
genuinely are nice.
Yeah, exactly. There's, they're not the twins from The Shining standing in the hallway
Hmm.
staring at you. Yeah. And then the other, we've already talked. Oh, I just
Let's
want to
go
talk
through our list.
yeah. Do you mind if we do Dog and Catcher first, just because we've talked about them
Sure. Yep.
before we get into new ones? So yeah, I just did think it was super cute in a really creepy way, like dog wallowing in the mud and like cooling off. It just felt very realistic dog behavior,
Yep.
which is horrifying considering dog is at least partly human.
Yep. I wonder what
Uh,
other like dog behavior he has. Like he doesn't
yeah,
have a mouth, but I'm sure he would want to like go and fetch a
lick.
ball.
Yeah, or chew on rawhide.
Yep.
Um, I was also fascinated by like the friendliness and familiarity between the lambs and dog and catcher. Like
Yeah.
they clearly, Gordon sitting there petting dog, and dog visibly relaxes,
Hmm.
and catcher like I think specifically asked for the lambs to be involved,
Yeah.
which
It
you know,
shows that they have this like professional background.
and relationship. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
a, um, yeah, and what else
It
did
would
I
be
have here?
kind of weird if they didn't have that familiarity, considering that they're
But
both like.
yeah, but I could also see the Academy, like, just keeping all of its projects separate from each other. It's like, okay, Dog and Catcher are deployed over there. No need
That's
for the
fair.
lambs to be there. It's like this seemed more friendly than sure professional, but like more friendly than that. Like
Hmm.
I got a sort of vibe of affection more than
Yeah.
just professional respect.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh. Also, I did get a kick about Mary having skunk urine ready to hide from dog, which, like, it totally makes sense as a rumor to spread. It's like skunk urine,
Yes.
this like totally foul odor that is going to make you super distinctive for dog to catch you, and is going to repel anybody around you who might want to help you and
Yes.
like stand you out even more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you think about it for like 2 seconds, it really doesn't make sense to think
at
that skunk
all.
urine would hide you.
Not on any level. Anything.
On a
Yep.
unrelated tangent, I've learned that synthetic urine is a good way to get rid of skunks.
Interesting.
We had a skunk that decided to move into our backyard a couple years ago
Okay.
and was living under the shed. We didn't like that because we have a dog and we don't
That's
want the
going to,
dog and the
yeah.
skunk to
Meat.
interact. And we got some synthetic coyote urine from
Okay.
Canadian Tire.
And
And
dog urine wouldn't
just,
have done the trick?
well, dog urine might have done the trick, but coyote urine is like specifically a predator of
Okay.
skunk. So skunk smelled the coyote urine, thought there was a coyote around, and made itself scarce, and it worked really
Skedaddled.
well. So,
Interesting. That's cool. I didn't know that. Um,
maybe they should have used coyote urine instead of skunk urine, and it
maybe.
would have worked.
Maybe. I'm wondering, I guess, how one synthesizes urine.
I don't know,
I
just
don't know. Like,
ammonia and
uh, yeah, right? I don't know.
something. I don't know. I'm sure they do it in the academy all the time.
Oh, yeah, there's a whole urine lab. The kidneys of the
Yep.
academy. Okay.
Now let's move on to Gorger,
Sure.
who is
Um,
interesting because he's new.
Very new, and Wildbow managed to create a viscerally disgusting character in less than 50 words.
Yeah, so you know, business as usual for Wildbow.
Yep, yep. But this one's I don't know why this one stood out to me.
Okay,
Um, the image I had of it. Did you ever watch? Oh, what was it? Legion. Is
no,
that what it was called? The show Legion.
I haven't watched very many shows.
Okay. Yeah, Legion is sort of derived off by from the X-Men show, but it's like it was a really good show. But one of the antagonists is what's this guy's name? I've completely forgotten. It's been years since I watched it. The Shadow King, and like, let me see if I can get an image for you and for our audience out there. But it's kind of what I picture. Nope, that's not right. I am sending it to you right now. Are you gonna let me copy the image? Yes. There. That's kind of how I picture Gorger, but like naked.
Ooh, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So this guy, yeah, is just pale, very bloated, huge neck. He kind of looks like the Goblin King in the Hobbit movie a little bit.
True. Yeah, I think the image that is probably intended to go for is a corpse that's been soaking in water.
Yes, I can see that.
Just like gross and bloated. Um, and I kind of wonder, like, does the Academy make them gross on purpose, or is it just like a byproduct of like the process of creating your secret monsters?
I feel like they might want them to be gross on purpose if they wanted to like disgust people or scare people.
Yeah, it's like there's a certain level of emotional horror attached to
Hmm.
like this is clearly a monster hunting me. It's not a person.
Yeah, but also um, I feel like they just might not care. They're like,
There's also that too. Yeah, like we
so
don't.
long as it kills people or can catch people, who cares what it looks like? Oh, it looks gross. Well, whatever.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like, if you remember at the very beginning when Mrs. What's her name, whose name we always keep
The
forgetting.
the the horror, the rabbit deer fetus thing?
Yeah, and we're like, this is a fancy lady. If she could get something that looked nice, she probably would. But there's
Yeah,
kind of a status symbol to having the big, disgusting
horror.
horror. So maybe there's that as well. Like it's like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, look, we're so powerful that we don't have to care
That's
if it's gross.
and it's probably a bit of all of the above.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Um, and I think you posted this bit here, or not posted, but you
Yeah,
copied this
I
bit.
pulled out a couple of quotes just kind of describing the Gorger. You know, how like is fat and naked with skin that looked too thick, bugged out eyes with too small pupils that move too slowly, and then let your guard down and he hits you like a freight train. Can't hurt him with anything short of a proper cannon. I doubt even we would contrive to get him to stand in one, or to stand in the way of one for long enough. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like he looks. I get the impression that he looks like he wouldn't be much of a threat, and yet, you
Yeah.
would underestimate him, and then he would just like pulverize you, sort of thing.
And I get the impression based on that comment about, I doubt even we could contrive to get him to stand in the way of one for long enough. It kind of implies that he's smarter than one would assume.
And faster and more agile.
Yeah, one assumes he's like slow, bloated, stupid,
Yeah.
brute thing just coming at you, whereas he's probably a lot more clever than one thinks, and
hmm
as you said, a lot more fast and agile. Um,
Yes.
unlike the next monster, Whiskers.
Whiskers, aka Fluffy, aka what was it?
What was
What did Jamie call?
Jamie's? Who was so slow he was almost fourth out of three.
Yes. Yeah, Whiskers is really interesting because he's a big creature. Like they said, C
Yeah,
tier, which, unlike our usual tier list, it
yeah,
seems to be just referring to the size.
yeah. Bigger than a person and smaller than a coach car.
Yes. And
Um,
it's covered in hairs.
yeah,
Um,
and like it's it's a stupid monster, I think. Um,
yes.
clearly it's killed some people, so it's not as ineffective as one might think. But first the first thing Hale says about it is that the experiment loose is spreading, which implied something far scarier than what we actually got. I think
Oh, you thought it would be like, some sort of mold or something that just gets
something like
bigger and
that.
bigger and
Yeah,
bigger? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like, okay, so let me describe what it says. Less than you might think. It moves deliberately. It identifies lone prey and smashes itself against that prey. The hair cuts on contact, and the experiment uses its own mass to pulverize. It smears itself against destroyed prey to coat itself in blood and absorbs the nutrients through gaps in the scaling, which sounds like a
Lovely.
stupidly ineffective way to do basically all of that.
as Lillian points out right away.
Yes, yeah, like it's such a dumb project. I
I'll admit that like my first thought as well was this is a really stupid way of feeding it.
yeah,
But thinking about it afterwards, I was like, you know what? Having it need to do this in order to feed means that it's going to be very motivated to smash everything and coat itself in blood over and over and over again. And that's perfect if you want to absolutely scare the shit out of everyone, which presumably they want to do.
but they also talk about it being like, oh, instinctively it hides unless it finds an individual to like attack. So like
Yeah,
its
but
instincts are to not be constantly smashing things and sucking it up and pulverizing it.
well, it's both, right? Because it's a predator, but it also stays to the shadows.
It's an ambush
So
predator.
that means you never see the monster itself. You just see the smashed up remains of its prey and this like trail of blood leading
Okay,
into the shadows. And
if
wouldn't that be the most terrifying thing you ever encountered?
maybe. However, were I, what's his name, Walter Gund or whatever his name is, I think I would have spliced in, I don't know, starfish or something, so it has a gut that it can extrude after it's smashed you and just swallow you up, rather than having to, spend 5 hours slowly and methodically grinding you into paste before it can swallow you.
Yes, well, that's why you're not in the academy, and Walter
Apparently.
is.
It's just like, can you imagine the metabolic energy cost of
Yep.
lugging your giant, larger than a person, smaller than a car body back and forth, however many thousands of times, in the hopes that you get enough blood between the cracks in your scales that you
Mhm.
can have enough energy to hide in the shadows for someone and hunt someone else?
Now I'm just wondering, like, how the heck did Walter and his colleagues get enough food for this project while they were building and raising it?
Flesh is cheap, dead flesh is cheaper.
They just hire the body man from a few chapters ago.
Yeah,
He it was like they think that he's going around to get parts to experiment on. No, he's just collecting food for Whiskers.
yep.
Not even the other beasts, like
No, just Whiskers.
just Whiskers. Whiskers eats more than
Yeah.
all the other projects combined.
So maybe they have, some more efficient way of feeding it when it's in the lab, some IV of blood directly into its thing so it doesn't have to.
Yeah, maybe that would make sense. That would be smart. That would be smart. So clearly they won't do
They did
that.
not do that. I have very little respect for this particular project. It is a stupid project.
I wonder what it looks like. Like, all we know of it is that it is covered in hairs, but like, does it have four limbs? Does it walk on two legs? Like,
I pictured it basically a grub. Like a giant
I
white
kind of did as
grub.
well.
Just like a hairy grub.
I kind of imagined it as like a sea urchin.
Okay. That has longer hairs than I was picturing. But
Okay.
yeah,
I was kind of imagining like the hairs of it as being like porcupine type thing. You know,
sure, I can see that. I was picturing them much finer. I don't
okay,
know.
I can see that.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I'm just,
But like they say that it's
this is a
what
failing
like
grade.
they say that it's what placate or placate,
Yeah,
which is kind of like scales like on a fish.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
kind of imagine it being like completely covered like a porcupine rather than
Maybe you're right.
I don't know. It's probably not like any of those things.
No, I doubt my mental image is going to be able to shift it away from like a hairy white grub.
Sure.
But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Certainly very interesting monster and certainly horrific. So I wonder if it's going to like kill anyone important like Hale or
maybe.
something.
I don't know, and I'm sure that's not the case, but I kind of feel like this is the kind of monster that if you know it's there, you can just walk fast and get away from it. Like, I don't picture it to be a fast monster, which I guess is why it's an ambush predator, not a
Yeah.
hunter.
I wonder who would win between Whiskers and Gorger.
Gorger. There's no question. Gorger just eats Whiskers for breakfast.
Yes, but then Whiskers like churns up his insides and slowly absorbs him. So they like both digest each other from the outside in and the inside out.
I think you're giving Whiskers too much credit here.
Yes, I definitely am, but
So Whiskers is a useless project that should have been cut immediately.
yes. Well, we know that the Academy loves its failed projects.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of get the feeling like maybe all of the successful projects get shipped off to like the war or whatever,
Yeah.
and they leave the failures behind to do like Academy business.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. But I mean, I feel like it would make sense to have something like Gorger on the front line unless there's some flaw that we're not aware of. It can tank cannonballs and won't actually be in front of the cannon long enough to actually be hit by the cannonball.
Hmm.
But who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to historic references?
Sounds good. So our Twilight character next. Hashtag Team Jacob.
Yeah. So Gordon saying to Walter when Walter is uh, in the clutches of Helen, he says, "You're crawling on the ground with your balls in a little girl's hands." Gordon said, "What do you think you are, the next Jacob Black?"
Which is, I guess, an accurate description of the plot of Twilight.
I haven't read Twilight, so I wouldn't know, but um, yeah, Jacob Black, of course, is a character in Twilight, but Wildbow actually commented on the page in Twig that he didn't actually know that it was a Twilight reference. So
Sure, Wildbow.
there doesn't seem to be any other significant Jacob Blacks.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything.
There are quite a few significant Jack Blacks, even ones other than the actor.
Jack Black.
Um,
Yeah.
but none of them seem to be the sort of character that Gordon was referring to.
It's probably one of those names that is just like, we're building world here.
So I get the feeling that this Jacob Black is a fictional character, a fictional historical figure.
Or a fictional character.
Well, that's also possible.
Yeah. But I don't know.
But yeah, I think we can choose to interpret that as a Twilight reference, even
I
though,
I intend to.
yes.
Um, the other thing that we talked about before we get thing is that we learned that Christmas exists in this setting, which makes sense. What orphanage is complete without a Christmas setting?
Yeah, I mean, we've already established that this is a Dickens like
Exactly.
setting, and of course, what's a Dickens like setting without Christmas?
Exactly. And then yeah, we learn about another town which has a very different sound from Radham.
Wiltwick. Um, yes. So Walter Gunn's father is a politician in Wiltwick,
Mm-hmm.
which is, they say it's a prominent city, and that's all we learn about it. So I went to see what the heck is there an actual Wiltwick? And it turns out that there's a city called Kingston in New York,
Not Canada.
not Kingston, Canada, not Kingston, Jamaica, Kingston, New York, USA. Um,
The weird place that doesn't have Interac.
yeah, what's up with that? Anyway, um, yeah. So Kingston, I don't think is a prominent city by any stretch of the imagination.
I've heard of it.
And furthermore, IRL, Kingston was called Wiltwick during the 1660s, which is a long time before any of this Twig stuff happened, long before
Mm-hmm.
Wollstonecraft famous work. So if this is that place, then
Our alternate
that
history
world, then
starts.
our alternate, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Much earlier point of divergence
Yeah.
than Wollstonecraft.
Though I do kind of feel like just the fact that it is a Dutch name kind of grounds us further in the American Northeast,
Okay,
just because of the history, the context of colonial efforts in North America,
okay,
which I mean is where that name comes from historically anyway, is Dutch settlement in the New York
yes.
area.
But also,
Yeah.
the Dutch were really big settlers in like Indonesia type area, I think. So we could
Sure,
be there.
we could absolutely be there, but I
Yeah, no, you're probably right.
my mental my mental image of Radom is somewhere in the Adirondacks.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So as far as Wiltwick meaning anything, um,
Yep.
I I asked Megafire, who is Dutch, for some thoughts,
Hmm.
and they pointed out that Wick means like a neighborhood or a borough, which makes sense because we have stuff like that in English, like Greenwich or New Brunswick. Um, and Wilt apparently means wild, or at
Okay.
least that's what a bunch of websites suggest it means. So it just means like a wild place, and apparently it was called that because of the indigenous people who
Oh,
attacked the settlers there.
so therefore it is a wild place.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that again doesn't really tell us anything
Anything, but
particularly about this place. But
it gives us some context and some like historical flavor
yeah,
and tells us
so
that the Dutch exist in this setting.
or that a language that sounds exactly like Dutch.
Sure.
um, yeah, hopefully we'll find out more about Wiltwick and other places
Hmm.
besides Radham eventually. But if not, it's interesting to remark upon. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
let's jump into characters.
Cool.
Um, yeah, first thing I wanted to point out is that Catcher refers to the Lambsbridge gang as the Lambs.
Yep.
And when we started this podcast, I was kind of trying to avoid referring to them as the Lambs
Hmm.
until it came up in the story. And then it just kind of like,
It's hard not to once
it's
you've
hard not to, um, because Lambsbridge Orphan Gang is kind of a mouthful. But
teensy bit.
at least now, I don't even know if they've been called the Lambs before this point in the
I don't believe
story.
so.
Um,
Because I was going through my notes from my live read, and I had asked if, like, oh, is there a fan name for like the Lambsbridge Orphans? And then came across the Lambs, and then I think it was Megafire actually is like, yep, you were asking about that. That's what it is. So I'm pretty sure it was at
okay,
this point
right. So anyway, that's all behind us. We're now
officially
officially,
using
canonically the
Lambs.
Lambs.
Yep,
Yes, not to be confused with the Lambsbridge Orphans, which includes characters like Rick and
Edna
Fran
or
and
whatever.
all them. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So you want to talk about Psy first?
Well, I mean, we always talk about Cy first because he's the main character. And the interesting thing I think about Sylvester in these chapters is he totally has a crush on Mary.
Absolutely, and he
And
lies to
totally,
himself.
and I can't tell whether he doesn't realize it or if he just like refuses to admit it.
Bit of both.
Yeah, probably a bit of both.
Yeah. But yeah,
Um,
because he's. I mean, what really stood out to me to like point towards that is that he gets jealous that Mary and Lillian have a friendship.
yeah,
Yeah, he's upset that he wasn't able to be with Mary as much as Lillian was to build a friendship.
yep,
Maybe is the what he's thinking, but
yep.
yeah, it's I mean, it's also it kind of points to Sai's actual age in a way, in that
Hmm.
he's, a prepubescent slash pubescent boy trying to come to terms with having a crush on a girl who tried to kill him.
Yeah. So probably he might not even like recognize the
Yeah.
feeling, or like he might think, oh, gross romance, cooties,
Mhm.
whatever. Um, so he might be like, this isn't romance. Romance is gross. I just feel protective and
Yeah.
want to make sure that uh, that she's doing things my way.
Mhm.
And I feel like, Sai is always trying to manipulate people and leverage the situations, but the amount of scheming he does on Mary in these two
Mhm.
chapters is like a little bit much.
Well, and I mean, Mary's giving as good as she's getting
That's
there.
true. Yes.
She is absolutely. I mean, I think on some level, well, not on some level, I think it's pretty explicit. She sees Sai as her patron, I guess. So
Hmm.
she wants like to keep him on her side as much as possible because he's the one who's advocated for her. and if he turns on her, then she doesn't have the safe haven of the lambs anymore.
Right. Well, at first, yes, but now she's got Lillian
True,
on her side, and I'm sure Lillian is a more reliable patron than Sai ever could hope to be.
probably. But yeah, I mean, you put in the notes, I wonder how much Mary is playing him, and I think the answer is a lot, but Sai
Mhm.
is also playing her a lot, so it's
Well,
like,
I I was mostly thinking about that in terms of the hand holding, because in this
oh
chapter,
yeah,
like there's this whole thing where like Mary and Sai are holding hands,
mhm,
and then Mary like very deliberately doesn't hold hands with
and
him, and
Sai
he's
spends
wondering,
a lot of time thinking about it.
yes, um, and he's like going through it in his very Sai way of being like, oh well, here are the motivations, and here are
Mhm,
like, maybe if I do this and appeal to her sense of belonging, then maybe she'll hold my hand again, sort of thing.
mhm, mhm,
And like,
totally not a crush.
yes, but also like he's so busy like plotting at her that I'm like, I mean, Sai's just a kid, but like that's not how you treat the girl that you have a crush on, by like manipulating her.
It's a
Um,
Psy version
but it
of,
is
like,
a side version
the
of things.
yanking on ponytails because I don't know how to interpret that I actually
Yes,
like this girl, or
yes, exactly. But it was in that part of the story where Sai was like trying to figure out like how he could like maintain his control on how Mary was thinking of him
yes.
with this whole hand holding thing. And I was like, I wonder how much Mary is using this whole hand holding thing and thinking like the same thing, like, oh, if I like don't hold his hand, I wonder what Sai's reaction will be, and can I like get him to
Yeah,
maintain his patronage of my membership or whatever she's after. Like, we don't really see much of that.
mhm.
But I wonder how much Mary is
Manipulating?
manipulating him
Yeah. I
rather
mean,
than him manipulating her.
yeah, absolutely, and I don't know how much we can answer that, but I think that just from what we know of Mary, she was designed to be a manipulator as much as Psy.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, yeah,
I look forward to seeing more of their interaction
me too.
because it's very fun.
Definitely.
We also had a few other interesting beats
Mhm.
about Sylvester, like the whole thing about his head getting hot sometimes, and he likes the rain to cool it off. I mean, lots of people get their head hot sometimes, but
I
like,
mean,
I feel like for Sai, it's like, he's got his weird super monster brain,
yeah,
and it's probably overheating.
overclocked his brain a little bit.
Yes,
But yeah, but that I'm gonna date myself here very much, but it made me think of Napoleon Dynamite. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I didn't. I
Okay,
was in the
that's not
I was in the
important.
right generation for it, but I never saw it.
Yeah, no,
Um,
not important.
okay,
Yeah, just it made me think of a particular scene from that movie.
sure,
But yeah, we can move on. But yeah, I do definitely think that that's important because of his, as you said, monster brain.
yeah.
Um,
It
and
was
we
the
already
whole
talked about the wrong on four counts thing.
Yeah, I just felt it was like Psy really kind of had the was giving me the impression of that sort of like actually
Yeah.
thing.
Mhm. Yep, and then Gordon just, like, undercutting him the
Yeah,
entire time.
which was hilarious.
Oh, absolutely. Um, and then you mentioned the next bit there. I'll let you read it.
Don't nod, Sylvester, Hale said. I'm directing this largely at you. Oh, right, because that was when Hale was telling them, like, we're going to go after this monster. You're going to focus on Walter. You're not going to get distracted and go do some crazy, weird conundrum thing.
Climb a wall and carve sign a letter in blood
Mhm.
type of
And,
deal. Yeah.
and Sylvester's like, of course, of course. And Hale is like, no, Sylvester, you're the one I'm looking at.
The rest of your the lambs are not going to do this. This is you.
Yes. But also, like we've mentioned before, everyone knows how Psy ticks. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Gordon's got him down, Hale has
Helen
got him down, Helen's got
Mary
him down.
does. And actually, I think that kind of thematically points to, as you were just talking about, how much is Mary manipulating him, and I think thematically everybody this chapter knows how what buttons to push, so it makes
Yes,
sense that Mary also does.
yes. I suppose it just means that Mary is fitting in well with the team.
Yeah, exactly. Bonding there.
Yes.
Um, yeah,
So in terms of other lambs, Mary, we've pretty much
well covered, I think.
well covered her already. Jamie, like they have this whole conversation between Jamie and Cy
Hmm.
at the beginning of chapter 1, and I just feel like Jamie is so like genuinely kind and
Yeah,
considerate. Like Gordon, they kind of go on about how he looks good and heroic, but underneath he's actually kind of mean. But Jamie, I feel, is just so genuinely kind and
yeah,
considerate
I would agree.
in a way that's like kind of a good counterpoint for Cy, who
Hmm.
is like kind of like a
A
Cy
jerk.
is a jerk and Jamie is so nice
Hmm.
and they're also best friends and that's what I
Yeah, I
love.
was gonna say it definitely because we definitely get the impression that Sai is closer to Jamie than any of them.
Yeah.
And I also thought it was interesting. Sorry, sort of a tangent on that, but that it's implied that Jamie's a little older than Sai, which is the first time I got that feeling. Well, when they're talking about being interested in girls or whatever, Jamie says, "Oh, you're still a few years from that," like implying that he's not a few years
Hmm.
from that.
See, I got the impression that Jamie might also be a few years from that, but he also just like knows the fact that oh, the year that this would be relevant is
A few
in the
years,
future.
maybe you're right. I don't know.
I don't know. I read it as Jamie being Jamie rather than anything
Hmm.
about Jamie's age, but I think you could be right as well.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that Cy turns this topic from him and Mary to the topic of Jamie and
Oh,
Fran likes
absolutely.
you,
Yeah.
and it's like just reinforcing in case anyone did missed the fact that there was some crushing going on there.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
also Jamie's reaction to that is interesting because like he reacts by looking worried,
Yeah.
like
Like,
you know,
uh-oh.
like if he was interested in that, then that would be one thing. And if he wasn't interested and was like, "Oh, really? What?" But being worried is not really a reaction that I would expect from him.
I don't know. As you said, Jamie is like a good person, a decent person. I can see the worry being like, oh, I don't want to hurt someone, or
Sure,
like I don't know the reaction. I mean, I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but
yeah. I don't know. I just thought it was like a unexpected reaction, and I wasn't sure
yeah,
how to
no,
take that.
for sure, for sure.
Um, Gordon,
Yeah.
on the subject of being interesting contrast to Psy, Gordon also like he has this appearing decent but is actually a jerk,
Hmm.
and Psy appears to be a jerk but is actually a decent person underneath, which is an interesting contrast.
It is, and I kind of wonder how much of it is true and how much of it is size perception,
Yeah.
of Gordon.
Hmm.
And I mean, I don't know that we can answer that yet, but
Yeah, because like, yeah, Gordon's purpose in this unit is to be like a good fighter and
a good
able to
face.
and but also a good face. So like the good face is part of his role, but the more
Yeah,
sinister underneath is also part of his role.
yeah,
So what he himself is actually like beneath both of those is not yet
and,
revealed, I guess.
and maybe not yet like concretized. That's not a
Yeah,
word. Um, is it a word?
I understood it. So
Okay. Yeah, I mean, because I think that we do have a sort of running theme of all of them not quite having grown into themselves yet.
mm,
Which is interesting actually, knowing that they have expiration dates. Like, are they
yes,
going to be able to grow into what they're going to grow if they have,
hmm,
expiration dates?
yeah. Also, like it just occurred to me that Gordon seems a lot older than he is because we're
Yeah,
seeing him from Sai's perspective, and Sai is younger than Gordon.
that's a good point.
But Gordon is also
Like
a
a
little
child.
kid as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
like my mental image of Gordon is like late teens, but he is very much not.
yeah, he's
Like 13
definitely
at
yeah.
most.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah. And like we also get size evaluation that, He says, "One day, not now, but soon, I imagine he'll hone that hidden edge to a razor point. Used right, he could draw girls to him. Good looks, build, and knight in shining armor image to get their initial interest,
Mhm.
then hinting at the secret beneath the surface to hook them."
Mhm.
Which, I can sort of see that, but I could also be like, I wonder if this is Psy saying, like, this is what I would do if I
That is, yeah,
had
Psy
Gordon's.
being ungenerous.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. Not problem is not the right word at all, but the result of having an unreliable narrator.
Hmm.
We don't know what is Psy and what is truth,
Yes.
and where those 2 diverge.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Lillian is next on our list. I didn't really have much to say about her, but I noticed that there were a few places where Sylvester was referring to her as Lillian again, and
Mhm.
she wasn't Lil anymore.
But he does refer to her as Lil a few times,
Okay. Was
um,
that was that near the beginning or near the
near
end?
the end.
Near the end? Okay. So it's just no longer consistently Lil, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Which maybe is because Mary's in the group and he's feeling jealous that Lillian has spent time with Mary, so he's, like, distancing himself a little bit from her, the familiarity with Lillian.
Hmm, that's possible. I kind of just thought that he was like had kind of forgotten that he was
Oh, I can see that
doing
too. He
doing this
forgot he
to
was being
annoy
a dick.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's also
because he has mentioned that he like doesn't have a very good memory for things, and I imagine that.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I didn't note this down, but I thought was interesting was that Cy and Gordon both sort of try to make it so that Lillian doesn't have to go down to the bowels with them, and Hale's like, no, she's going.
Yeah, that's true. Well, my interpretation of that was that Cy wanted Lillian to think that he would be fine with her staying safe, even though he totally knew that she was
Wouldn't be
going to
able
be.
to.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, no, it's performative,
yes.
but
Um,
I'm
yeah,
sure that if it had worked, he would have been perfectly okay with it.
yeah. Also,
It's
I
like
guess. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's like what's his name, Tom in like the first chapter, where he's okay with using this kid to do things, but if it happens to keep this kid safe, then great.
Mhm. Yeah.
You were saying?
I was just going to say that we kind of need to also remark that Lillian and Mary are becoming very good friends.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important character detail for Lillian.
Yeah, definitely. And
And
then last and definitely not least of the lambs,
Helen.
Helen. We've
Hel-
talked a little bit about her already.
yeah, so the first kind of interesting thing we see of Helen is this sort of swaying behavior.
Hmm.
It says she was walking more slowly, swaying a little with her hands clasped behind her back, her skirt swishing left and right with each set of steps. And then Sai starts speculating on why she's doing
It
this.
sends him into a whole like mental
Yeah,
spiral.
yeah,
Like, is this for me? Who is this for? Is what's going
yeah.
on? And
And like unlike the Mary holding hands spiral he goes
mhm,
into, this one is actually like a very reasonable, like
yeah,
intellectual exercise because Helen, as we've noticed, is very statuesque when she is at her
hmm,
default, and statues don't really swish with their hands clasped behind their back.
yeah.
So it actually is like a question, like, um,
Why are you doing this?
why are you doing this?
Though I liked the idea that Sai had. It's like maybe she's doing it for herself, like trying to graft together bits of personality to create like a cohesive person.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think I don't, I'm not sure whether it was just because it was the last option that he discussed, or if it was actually like his conclusion that
Yeah.
she was doing it to get a reaction from Sai and see
Hmm.
what Sai would think.
And if she is, why is she doing that? Why is she like
Hmm.
doing this with Sai? Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how much of Helen's like thought process is like recognizable.
Well, I mean, that kind of begs the question, like, what is Helen? Like, how did Ibot make her? Like, did he start with a human and, like, strip some stuff out and add more stuff in? Or did he, like, I don't know, use an octopus and paste human on top of that?
Probably like a bit of both, like a dash of human, a dash of octopus.
Some spider monsters, some
Yeah, a little bit of tardigrade. Um,
so she can, hibernate in space if she ever ends up there. And
you know that Helen could totally hibernate in space.
oh yeah, just pour a bit of water on a Helen, and she turns into a living Helen again.
Yes. Um, but like I kind of imagined like you know how with like a lot of machine learning algorithms, like you can see the sort of decisions that they're
Yeah,
doing, but like the process by which they come to those decisions is just so alien.
yeah.
And it's like I wonder if Helen's like thought process is even recognizable
I
to
it
to
I have
Sai, who understands
yeah.
how people tick, but Helen isn't people in the same way that other people are.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the destination I reckon would probably recognize, but the journey itself would not.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like she gets to, if Sai gets to 4 with 2 and 2, she gets there, you know, 2 times 2 or, -2 times -2 or something to get to the same answer.
Oh no, she's doing complex analysis to get there.
Okay, yeah, sure.
And then, like, Mary said, it's like, she's scary, Mary murmured. You're scary, I said.
Mhm.
Scary, cried Gandalf, and so am I, very scary. More scary than anything you will ever meet, unless you are brought alive before the seat of the Dark Lord. And Aragorn is scary, and Legolas is scary. You are beset with scariness, Gimli, son of Glóin, for you are scary yourself, in your own fashion.
Yeah.
Wait, I think I got distracted with a different story there.
Nope, 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 no. That's a Wild Bow line.
um, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
um,
No, that's it's
it
valid.
is a good point that Helen is scary, but she's
So
among other scary
so
monsters.
is Mary. Like Mary is, the product of a she is a copy of a dead little girl designed to be a murder weapon. She is scary.
Yes.
Um, I thought it was interesting that you know when Helen has to distangle herself from like the gaggle of admiring orphanage girls. Like I think Sai says the 4 to 6 year olds don't like her; they find her off putting, which probably good instincts by a 4 to 6 year old, and like everybody else thinks she's like the best. You know, pretty cool, aloof, turns into a spider sometimes. What's not to like and idolize?
Yep. Yeah, I guess she just has that like what is it called? Like the uncanny valley.
Yeah, probably. Just
Once you're old enough, you kind of
mhm.
get
Like,
over
oh,
that like
y
instinctual level of understanding people, but
yeah.
like the little kids still have that, and they're like, "There's something off, and I don't know what it is."
And you posted the next line that we have here. Uh,
Yeah, which is the whole thing about Helen growing up
mhm.
um, in the bowels.
And I think it's interesting because, every time we hear about Helen putting or, acting emotional on some level, it's affected. But here I think we get genuine Helen emotion.
Hmm.
She's smiling, looking excited.
Yeah, this is her place.
Yeah,
She's home.
exactly. Unlike any other place that she's in, she's much more unguarded on some
Hmm.
level here.
Yeah, she probably feels more comfortable around like the monsters and
Mhm.
the whiskers and the gorgers of the world than she is with like the other
Yeah.
orphans of the orphanage.
Mhm.
Um, I thought it was funny, like, she's like, I think you can even find toys I hid from Ibbot here and there.
Yeah.
And then Sly's like, Mary doesn't want to know what kind of toys they are.
Like, I'm being a dick.
So, in terms of other people, I suppose we can start with Rick because he kind of is the start of the chapter.
Yeah.
And I think, despite Cy being obviously biased about Rick, I think he's right that Rick really is super annoying and
The vibe I got of Rick is that he is a bully, but he's bullying with, like, kindness because it gives him plausible deniability.
mhm,
Like, he knows that this is bothering Sai, so he's doing it to bother Sai. But then,
yes,
if someone calls him out, he's like, "What? I'm just being nice. I'm a nice guy. What do you want?"
yep, yep,
Like, yeah, it does not feel like a genuine care or
mm,
affection. It's a
yeah.
little kid that I can harass.
Mhm. I think that I'm with Jamie. Like, you know, Sai is very much over
Oh yeah,
over exaggerating how messed up Rick is, but he's not wrong.
no,
It's he still is like
a bully.
a bully and a
Yeah. Like, sure,
awful
he's
person.
probably
And
not going to be, was it Sai says murdering people with like knitting needles dressed up as his mother or something?
yeah,
But yeah, he's a petty little bully. It
yeah,
feels.
yeah. And I like Jamie being like, I know what his story is, and
I'm
I am
not telling
never
you.
going to tell you.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm like, good call, Rick. Good call.
Yep. I wonder if we're ever going to find out. Probably not.
I'd give it 50-50 chances,
Mm,
yeah.
yeah. Um.
We also meet Fran and Eliza, two of the other
Yeah.
orphans. I
And
don't think we learned anything particularly interesting about them.
no, just that. Well, I think one of them. I think it was Fran tells Sai not to be unkind, and I think this is like one of the few genuine reactions we get from him in react like to other people that aren't lambs. The lambs he'll react genuinely, but like she tells him not to be unkind, and he kind of is bashful about it. Like, oh yeah, you're right, I shouldn't be. And
Yeah,
I
that's
think that
fair.
kind of leads to my next point that like the other lambs, not our Lambsbridge orphan group, but the rest of the orphans, it kind of feels like our lambs are part of that group. They're a larger family more
Mhm.
than just these isolated kids who are, not part of the general population. Because it kind of feels like they all sort of fit seamlessly into the greater group of lambs.
Yes. Yeah.
Like even we're talking about Rick. He hasn't messed with him on the same level as he messed with Lacey. Say,
Yeah. Yeah. Because, like, Rick was a jerk to
yeah,
Sai, but Sai was way more of a jerk to Lacey than.
then he is back to Rick.
Yeah.
Yep. And then we have one more character to talk about here.
Walter Gund,
Walter Gund.
the student responsible for
Uh huh.
Whiskers.
Who is very uh big. The Wildbow's description of him is like this big, strong redhead with a handlebar mustache, and like it's just a very clear visual of a character. Like I picture him a like Victorian frat boy.
Yes, very much so.
um,
Yep.
yeah,
And, like, all of the description of him are very, like, oh, not Walter. Like, ugh.
yeah,
Like,
like
we tolerate Walter.
yeah, but just like oh, this guy, he's here because of money. He's
Yeah.
going around drinking around town and harassing girls and causing problems, but he's rich, so I guess we'll keep him around.
Yep.
Um, I looked up Gund as a last name just to see if it was anything, and I am certain that Wildbow chose this name on purpose because it is a Canadian toy company that makes stuffed animals, just like the Academy makes animals.
Ah.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is that Whiskers is a plushie.
Yes. Um, I think we should set up or get Wildbow to set up a store so we can buy Snowdrop T-shirts and Whiskers plushies and
Yeah, like he's never heard that
nope, never.
before.
The whole the Wildbow megaverse here,
Mhm. Yeah.
the Wildverse, the Bowverse. Um,
I, I would be satisfied with a nice, illustrated hard copy of one of his works, but
yeah,
no pressure.
no pressure. Nothing like finding a artist to do all
Nothing.
that work and yeah. um
Did you have anything more to say about Walter?
I don't really. We
Okay,
don't really know. I think we're going to get more to say about him in the coming chapter.
that's
We
fair.
talked a little bit about him and his ties to potentially a rival academy or whatever
Mhm.
outside power that's involved.
Yep.
And we're going to the interrogation presumably continues in the next chapter, so
Yeah.
sure we're
I'm
gonna
sure
have
we'll have more to say about him. So let's dive right into the discussion questions then.
woo. So
So
what was our
last week
discussion question?
we had two discussion questions. One was, tell us your favorite story about overthrowing the establishment, and the other one was, tell us your favorite whale fact.
Yep. So Tom Poos 31, which is a great name, Tom Thumb, but
En
French,
français. Yeah.
en français. talks about Dune. So it says Paul is reforming. They say Paul is
Oh, by the
reforming.
way, spoilers for all these
Spoilers
things.
for these things. If you spoiler for Dune first, and then Animorphs, and then
Mistborn.
Mistborn, and the Hands of the Emperor afterwards. So skip ahead if any of those are important to you. So Dune, Tompus says, Paul is reforming the Fremen, overthrowing the Emperor, and hijacking the Bene Gesserit master plan. He's the changer of ways, the architect of change, and still not radical enough for his own son, who's planning on destroying the Space Guild monopole on interstellar travel and to provoke a mass exodus of humanity into uncharted space. Dune being a story about our addiction to oil, it's interesting to see how much it takes to stop this dependency. Which, yeah, it's
Mhm.
a really good point.
Yeah. Hobo D-Ben says this is about Animorphs. Well, it's not. It's more about overthrowing a system rather than the system, but I do have a certain fondness for Animorphs. For those unfamiliar, Animorphs was a serialized young adult sci-fi xenopunk, the basic setup for which is not quite, but almost exactly entirely unlike the following
Yeah,
description. Professor Octavia Wildseed Butler used her PhD in physics to develop a teleportation device, but upon testing it for the first time, neglected to notice an intruding Flynn line, specifically a Busca puppet Masteria. And upon deposit in the receiving pod, their flesh had melded. Here, they link an
is a link,
artistic depiction.
which is a
Um,
cover of one of the Animorph books, I assume.
yeah,
That I don't
well,
remember them ever turning into a fly, but there are a lot of those books, and I don't think I read all of them,
yeah.
so I
So
could have definitely missed that one.
the art foreshadows her fate as a Christ-like sacrifice. Also, unfortunately, the destination pod had been relocated to Burma, and Professor Butler had to commit several war crimes against an oppressive government that would leave her with traumatic stress for the rest of her life until reuniting with an old friend in space who had been Borgified.
That
That
is
sounds like a
a
wild ride. I never read any Animorphs. They were super
oh,
popular when I was in elementary school, but I never read
yeah.
one.
No, this description of it is technically very correct, but also wildly misleading in what Animorphs is about. So I think it's safe to say that we actually don't have any spoilers for Animorphs here.
Well, they do say it's almost exactly entirely unlike that description.
Like, I can definitely see where they're coming from, and it is, on some levels, very accurate to what Animorphs was, but
Sure. Yeah.
it's also, yeah, like, that would not be my elevator pitch for Animorphs. Hobo Demon also has a whale fact. It says that orca are not technically whales, but rather a very large dolphin, and they have historically been known to assist whalers in hunting the big whales in exchange for getting to eat the delicious, delicious, tender tongue meat. Whalers were after the larger whales because until the process of refining crude oil by fractional distillation was developed, the rendered fat of whales was the only lubricant capable of keeping the Industrial Revolution running smoothly.
Hmm. And they also had a lot of other things that they would get
Perfume.
from whales, perfume being a big one.
Yep.
Um, if you've ever read Moby Dick, then you'll have been inundated with facts
A
about the whaling
a
trade for
lot of facts about the whaling trade. More so than
more than
the
you ever
futile
wanted
hunt.
to.
Like, there's more whale facts than
Actual story.
hubris
Yes.
hunting the, ego and all that there, yeah. Um,
Yep.
go ahead.
Spinagon says, as an example of overthrowing the system, I like Mistborn.
Which I have
And
never read.
you should. Okay, I'm not going to read the spoilered part of it then because you need to read it.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah,
Sengachi says The Hands of the Emperor, favorite published book about revolution. Carefully crafted category so I don't have to agonize over comparing it to Pale,
which
which
is
is
not published.
very much the story of revolution and changing systems. And but yes, The Hands of the Emperor, favorite, is a very slow story about the agonizing work of personal recovery and building a better world after an empire collapses. It's got a lot of ground to cover, and it's very happy to leave stuff unexplained until it's ready to get to it. So you've got to be willing to wait to have stuff explained, but it's so worth it. It's about an empire which fell apart catastrophically due to magic catastrophe, and had the line of succession lands in the hands of someone who wanted to fix things. The story follows the imperial secretary from a small, culturally denigrated colony who has dedicated his life to reforming the empire, and his platonic but very heart-wrenching relationship with the horribly lonely emperor who, because of imperial magics, literally can't even touch or spoken to without extensive purification rituals. and also about both of their dreams for a better world, loads of details about the exhaustive political reforms and bureaucracy it takes to get there, and the secretary reconnecting with his home and the emperor reconnecting with his humanity. Sounds interesting. I never heard of it.
Me neither, but yeah, something to add to the list.
Yep.
And finally, My Tallest says, my favorite whale fact is that fish with bones are more closely related to cetaceans than fish without bones.
Which, incidentally, is a Japanese fishing company. So, yes, fish with bones are more closely related to whales.
Yes, which
Sorry, I don't know
is,
where I was going with that.
I mean, fish without bones is also a product you buy at the grocery store. But yeah,
Boneless.
like
Yeah.
cartilaginous fish
Yeah.
are
Closely. Yeah.
not closely related to bony fish or
Yep.
whales, but whales and bony fish are more closely related to each other, which is just fascinating, and I
It
love it.
absolutely is.
Yeah,
Um,
and that, by the way, is like all tetrapods, like mammals, birds,
mhm.
reptiles, everything more closely related to bony fish than bony fish are to sharks.
Sharks are just aliens.
Sharks are just aliens.
Yep. So we have a new discussion question for this coming 2 weeks. Um, so we've talked about how different parts of the academy are represented by different parts of the body. So we've learned about, the brain, we've learned about the heart, we've learned about the bowels.
The ribs, the skin.
Oh yeah, we did learn about the skin, that's true. What other parts of the bodies are other parts of the academy? What's the academy's spleen, for example? Or what are the dorms
The dorms are the
considered?
ribs.
If you say so.
No, they said that.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
I missed that. That's a shame.
Lillian was very excited about it.
I completely have forgotten that. Um, yeah. So,
What's the pinky toe of the academy?
sure. What is the appendix? So yeah, you can leave that discussion question answer in our Reddit thread and also on the Discord. And that's, I think, is there anything else you want to talk about for this episode?
No, let's wrap it up so that you can put your baby to bed. And
Yep, it's a little bit later than he should be going to bed. He's going to be cranky, but that's okay. He's allowed to be cranky a little bit. So yeah, thanks for listening, everybody, and bearing with us in our erratic schedule. We say this regularly, but I'd like to get to a more regular schedule as time permits, and it's permitting more and more. So hope that you'll follow along with us as we keep exploring Twig. You can read along with us at twigserial.wordpress.com. And if you do, or even if you decide not to keep going, please go to Wildbow's Patreon, which is at patreon.com/wildbow, and support him. It's how he can produce all of these great stories and settings and things that we are reading.
you can reach us at totwigpodcast@gmail.com. TO Twig Podcast on Twitter, or I suppose I should say on
On
X.
X. Can you imagine? I mean, it has to be deliberate. There's no way that it's not deliberate to change from an iconic name and brand to something that is absurdly generic and uninspired.
I mean, he does really like X's. Didn't he name his kid X?
If you say so.
Anyway,
Anyway,
TO Twig Podcast on the platform formerly known as Twitter, a Reddit thread in r/parahumans, our discussion thread in the Doof Discord. Kind thanks to them for letting us host
still
that there.
squat.
And next episode, we'll be covering 2.3 and 2.4.
Yep, and we do have a biology fact by Dante today. Well, not by Dante, from Dante.
I'm taking over the biology facts today because this afternoon I was watching a video about butterfly metamorphosis.
Which is a
And
cool
yeah,
process.
and like his whole premise of the video was everything you learned about butterfly metamorphosis was a lie. And that was very much overstated because most of it was pretty accurate. But there were some really interesting things, such as, for example, did you know that caterpillars have proto wings under their skin that
I did
will
not know that.
develop into the wings when they become butterflies? Um, a lot of people think that like the caterpillar will form the chrysalis around itself,
Uh-huh.
but actually the chrysalis is just its skin. It sheds its old skin and has the chrysalis underneath.
I did not know that. That's really interesting. Yeah, I kind of assumed it was like, I don't know, silk or something. It's spun around itself, or
Moths will spin a cocoon around
yeah.
it,
I
but
just assumed that it was all the same thing.
butterflies, like it's actually the chrysalis is actually their skin.
Yeah, that's I did
Um,
not know that. That's fascinating.
yeah, and a lot of people think that the caterpillar kind of dissolves into this goo inside the
Mhm.
chrysalis,
It does not.
which it doesn't really. Like it digests its old body parts that it doesn't need anymore, but
Okay, but it's
it still maintains its basic structure as
okay.
it develops them and the
So it's
wings
not this like
grow up.
soup of
Yeah. Um, and
caterpillar DNA.
other interesting thing that I didn't know is that all of like the body parts of the
Mhm.
butterfly that the caterpillar hasn't developed yet, like the butterfly wings and the
The
legs and
proboscis.
yeah, it they're like little tiny discs that have like sort of like the pattern of them, and then they're just like little discs inside the caterpillar's body, and then when it's ready for them, like the discs grow into the big body parts that it needs
That
as an
is
adult butterfly.
really cool.
Yeah, so
No.
butterflies are fascinating,
Yeah, very much.
and also like 80% of insects that also go through the same process, but
Sure.
are not
That's
as
pretty.
charismatic as butterflies. Yes.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for that fact. It's a
Yeah.
good one, and hopefully, we'll be along again shortly.
Yeah. We'll see you when we see you, or I guess you'll hear us when you hear us.
Alright, have a good
And
night, everybody.
yeah, we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.